All right. I'm Peter Roe, and my website is loveyourhumandesign.com. I've been doing human design, or was introduced to human design, I should say, about 16 years ago. And for me, human design really encapsulated a lot of things. And there were a lot of aha moments as I started to learn about my design and started to learn about other people around me's design. And I have to say that, those aha moments have continued 16 years later, when I'm either working with a client or I'm just observing something in the world. Ultimately, at the core, where I think there's a lot of value is that human design celebrates your uniqueness. This slideshow is lengthy. It's probably much longer than we can do today, so I'm going to kind of hop around it. I'd previously recorded it. You'll see at the bottom reference to angelsteach.com. That's my wife's business. She teaches people really about intuition and connecting to their intuition. And so if you see that, that's just with the references. We previously did this whole slideshow and recorded it, but it was recorded in a Zoom session. So I can't share that because obviously we don't have permission from those people that appear in the Zoom session, but we're planning on recording it this weekend. So I will forward to Angela a link to basically opt in and get that full presentation for free at probably sometime next week. Human design is a mechanism of looking at yourself or others and seeing the characteristics, the patterns of how you are designed to express your energy and how you are designed to be impacted from the energy of others. And so I want to skip ahead to this slide. So as we begin, understand that this is a complicated topic, so go easy on yourself. No one picks up human design overnight. There's a lot of layers to it. It's definitely, if you've heard about the onion theory, that there, as you learn about something or you're working on yourself about something, that you hit layers and you make discoveries. And as you peel back a layer, that gives the opportunity for another layer to be uncovered. And so just trust that you'll need to know what you need to know as you go about it. Knowing yourself and your energy is really the first job that you want to do with human design. And then as you know yourself, you can start to understand and basically take in the energy and the design of the ones around you that you love. So again, understand it's a complicated topic. Go easy on yourself. And it's really, the expression I like to use is baby steps, that, you pick up a piece, then you pick up another piece, and eventually those pieces and those aha moments will come. So human design is made up of Eastern and Western astrology, the I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, quantum physics, the Kabbalah tree of life. And your design is determined by how the planets were aligned 88 days or 88 degrees before your birth. And since we're 365 days and there's 360 degrees in a wheel, it's just about 88 days. And as you look at your chart, I really like people to sort of pause when they look at their chart or their body graph and really kind of take in where things are colored in. And it doesn't matter the color. But where things are colored in is where you're designed to have consistent energy. And where things are white is where you're going to have inconsistent energy. You can amplify that energy from the people and the things going on around you, but you're also impacted by that energy more where the areas that are white than the areas that are colored in. It's just kind of like the wiring in a car or the wiring, electric wiring in a house. Where those things are colored in, there's a consistency. It's like if the light is wired to the light switch on the wall, I turn the light switch, the light comes on. But if it's not connected, if the connection's not there, then the light's not going to come on, or it's not going to come on right away. It needs some help, or it needs some amplification from those energies outside. You may hear, if you read about human design, you may hear people talk about conditioning. And this really mostly happens in the white areas. Somebody that, for example, has an undefined solar plexus, and that's the emotional center. They get conditioned by the emotions of people around them. A lot of people that have an undefined solar plexus get really heavily impacted by the drama that other people bring in. Somebody was in a car accident and they call you up, or they come over for a visit and they're talking about the car accident. If you have an undefined solar plexus, you can essentially relive that drama that person went through with that car accident or whatever emotional aspect of their life that they're talking about. It's important to understand that those undefined, those white areas in your chart are what you're here to be wise about, because you can harvest wisdom, or some people will call it intuition. Again, somebody with undefined solar plexus, their significant other walks into the room, they can tell without even looking at their facial expression or hearing what they say, how that person's feeling, whether they're happy or sad or mad or whatever. So there's a real gift, there's an intuition wisdom with these undefined or open areas, but you also shouldn't own it. It's like you don't own that other person's drama. It's their drama. You're here to be wise about it because you can perhaps say a kind word or help point them in a better direction, but it's not yours. And so this conditioning that we talk about, if that's occurring in your life, you want to be aware of it and you want to try to get rid of it. Things I commonly recommend are getting outside, sitting on a rock, going for a swim, taking a shower. If you're into crystals, crystals are great too. Additionally, you can use visualization. If you have a more open design, then you may want to visualize some kind of protection, a shield, a suit of armor, a golden light, especially if you're going into intense areas, like going into a crowded store or going into a hospital, because you don't want to come away from those experiences owning all that other energy that's not yours. So this is the body graph, and this is really, if you're into tarot and card reading, this is your tarot card. This is your design. This happens to be my design. And so, as I was saying before, you can see I have a lot of openness in the upper part of my design. So I'm potentially influenced in a lot of those areas. But I have a very defined core. So I have a lot of energy, and I have a lot of consistency with that energy and how that energy expresses itself. So if we look at the chart, you have really three aspects here. You have the centers, which are the shapes. You have the half lines. So in this case, my gate 4 is defined. So the half lines are gates. And then you have the full lines. And in this case, my 3740 channel is defined. So you have centers, gates, and channels. All of these from those systems that I mentioned, the chakra system, the I Ching, the Kabbalah tree of life, all of these have archetypal characteristics. So as you start to study your design, you can look at how that's expressed. To give you an example, the 3740 channel that I have right here is the channel of the tribe, the channel of the family. So one of the things I learned early on in human design is I'm always going to want to be part of a tribe. And for most of us, we might have many tribes. I would say you guys are probably a tribe here that you gather with. But, you know, I have my family. I play soccer, so I have a group of teammates. By design, I'm not going to be happy if I was living alone or I didn't have any tribes. And I have to say, from being restricted from COVID, I'm struggling a little bit, because even though I email and I Zoom and I Skype and I have my family, I'm missing some of that tribal time. So from a human design perspective, for me, it's comforting to know why there's a little bit of edge there for me, because I have this consistent energy that's not getting expressed properly. And I can at least mentally process that's why it's happening. There's not a lot I can do about it, you know, perhaps do a few more Zoom calls or those kind of things, but it brings an understanding, a self-understanding of why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. So I talked about the open and undefined centers. Those are the white, and the defined centers are the ones that are colored in. The difference between open and undefined is an open center has no gates defined on it. So if I go back to my design here, I have a completely open throat. I don't do readings that last more than an hour because I can't. My throat starts to hurt. I run out of things to say because I don't have the consistent energy. I noticed pretty early on when I was doing readings for people that if I did a reading for somebody that had an open or a very undefined throat, I would sometimes struggle because in that conversation, there was no throat energy between us. And so that's an open, no gates whatsoever. And in my case, it's kind of amplified because there's also no gates pointing towards the throat except this gate 10. And when you have a gate pointing towards a center, that ups the chance of an activation with another person. So if I met a person that had the gate 20, together we would form a throat, or at least I would form a throat. They might already have a defined throat as well. But so in terms of open centers, you can look, one, do they have any gates? And then two, are there any activations pointing towards that center that potentially will help? An undefined center is like my ajna. So up top, you've got the head and you've got the ajna. And so here, the second center down is the ajna. It's about processing ideas, thoughts, inspirations. And I have the gate 4 on the top of that. So it's not open, but it's called undefined because it doesn't have the colored in, it doesn't have a channel essentially connecting it. And essentially the way design works is that you get these two columns of numbers. And I think I have a slide on that. So let's see if I can skip to it. Maybe I don't. Okay. Well, in your chart, you'll see two columns of numbers from 88 days before you were born and the moment of your birth. And those are what make up your chart. And so if you take those numbers, if you took a blank chart that you know had all the shapes and the lines, but it wasn't colored in at all, and you take those numbers and you start to color in where those numbers are. So in my case, if I started and I colored in 37, and then when I color in 40, well, that makes the heart will center and the solar plexus defined because they have a defined channel. So that's really how you get the defined centers, is because you have a defined channel connecting those two centers. And so that gives those centers consistent energy. So here you have the centers laid out. And in terms of priority, I think for me, the profile is the most important. So I'm going to jump to that, but since we're on this slide. And so in terms of priority of understanding your design, I think it goes profile, then type, and then centers, and then incarnation cross. So that's kind of the order that I think is best to approach. But again, we're celebrating the individual here. So your path may be different. And I honor that. I honor that you will know what the path is for fully understanding your design. So just to briefly go through the centers, starting at the top is the head. Head is all about ideas and inspiration. I think there's about 7/8 of the population that have an undefined or open head. And what that means is that a lot of us have the potential to be inspired by everything out there. You know, you look out the window, you can be inspired by a bird or a tree or a plane flying by or a cloud. There's all these things out there that we can be inspired by. But the ultimate goal around the head is you want to spend time working on what is for you. Because again, I mentioned that these undefined centers, we can amplify others. So your best friend comes over and they're all excited because they've learned about a new science. And with an undefined or open head, you can get excited too. You can feel their excitement. You can listen to, you know, them listing off facts or figures about that. But ultimately, when they leave and you get out of their energy, if we're now suddenly, you know, we jumped on the internet and ordered a book or we ordered a video and they leave and suddenly we're like, you know what, I'm not really interested in that. It's because we've gotten carried away by the undefined or the openness of that center. And ultimately, we need to bring it back to our authority. And the authority comes out of your overall design. A lot of it is keyed by what type you are. And so I'll talk about that more in a minute. So that's the head. Moving down is the ajna. The ajna is equivalent to the cerebral cortex. It's the crunching of information. It's the crunching of processing of ideas. How does this work? You know, does it work well? All those kinds of things that the mind does. Together, the head and ajna are the mind. And below that is the throat. And In human design, all roads lead to the throat because that's where all expression comes out, whether it's singing or writing or whatever it is, it's going to be expressed via the throat. Moving down further is the identity center. The identity center is who you are. And people with a defined identity are going to have a more consistent view or more consistent expression of who they are. And people with an open or undefined identity are going to be influenced by others, are potentially going to waver in who they are. These might be people that became a doctor or a lawyer because, their parents always wanted them to be, only to find out that once they were in college or became a doctor or a lawyer, that's not really who they were. I look at the undefined identities as a gift in that, from a spiritual perspective, I look at human design as more of how this body is wired. And from a soul perspective, I look at especially the people with an undefined identity and the ability to really let that soul shine, let that soul express itself. Not that defined identities can't have their soul express it, but it gives that opportunity, that freedom for that soul to shine through. Moving down further, you have the heart will center. This is the ego. This is the willpower. People with a defined heart will are going to have a consistent tap on self-worth and willfulness. People with an undefined will center are going to be at times questioning their worth and at times struggling with willpower. Again, if it's undefined, you can amplify. A lot of times when I've worked with parents and they say their child is very willful, a lot of times they have an undefined or an open will, and they're amplifying the parent's will energy when a parent says, you go to your room or you need to do your homework. So again, that's an open or undefined will. Over on the left side is the spleen. The spleen is all about time and being in the moment. So notice I have an undefined spleen. I'm checking my clock to see how we're doing. Because with an undefined spleen, you can get lost in time. And it is a gift because you can go really deep into things and kind of lose yourself. But the rest of the world runs on time. So if somebody's waiting for a ride, they may not be so happy that you got lost in time. People with a defined spleen have a consistency there. And the spleen is also connected to the immune system. So in general, people with a defined spleen have more consistent energy for their immune system. People with an undefined or open spleen have an inconsistency. And in terms of health, they typically do better by stimulating the immune system with things like herbs, oil essences, vitamin C, as opposed to having something take over for the immune system, like antibiotics or vaccines or whatever it is. So it's something to just be conscious about. And again, with all of this stuff, it's individual. One of the difficulties in human design is we start to break things down into parts, but it's still the sum of the whole. It's still your whole design. And so what's good for one person with an undefined spleen may not be the right approach for another person with an undefined spleen, depending on their overall design. The red square is the sacral center or the sacral. It's what makes generators and manifesting generators generators. It's like the car engine, starts up in the morning, runs all day, burns out at night. If you're a non-sacral generator, then you may at times struggle with consistent energy. You may need a different approach. If you're in a 9-to-5 job, you may need a modified approach, taking a nap at lunch or taking more frequent breaks or whatever it is, to accommodate, because 70% of the population are generators or manifesting generators, and 30% of the population are non-sacral beings, those being projectors, manifestors, or reflectors. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. As I mentioned earlier, the solar plexus, it's all about emotions. If you have a defined solar plexus, you're defined to be emotional. You're going to have a pattern in your emotions. Emotions go up towards happiness and joy, and they go down towards sadness and despair. And you're going to have, in my case, I have two emotional channels. I have the 4130 and I have the 3740. So I have two emotional waves that create an emotional experience for me. If you're open or undefined emotionally, then if you lived in a cabin in the woods, you'd probably just be sort of even keel. You wouldn't necessarily experience swings in emotions. But most of us don't live in a cabin in the woods. So if you're undefined solar plexus, you're going to be impacted by your friends, your family, even the TV show that you might be watching or the video that you're watching. Those emotions carry energy, and that energy is going to cause a reaction within you. And lastly, the root center. The roots, it's connected to adrenaline. The root gets things started, gets things going. Because it's connected to the adrenals, I think it's a major factor why there's so many places to get coffee, because we humans, to get things started, rely on caffeine or tea, or caffeine with coffee, or other sources like tea, to give us that adrenaline boost, to get up in the morning, to get started, to get your day going, whatever it is. People with undefined root, I recommend more natural approaches than caffeine is to team up with someone. You can basically borrow root energy from someone that has a root, or if you form a root with someone else, then you can feel that root energy. I had a couple that I did a reading for, and they both had undefined root, but together they formed a root. And in talking to them, they always had made commitments to do, the wife would say, "Oh, I'll clean the house this weekend," and it wouldn't happen. And the husband would say, "Oh, I'll pick up the back room." It wouldn't happen. And what they found before they met Human Design was if they did it together, it happened. So you can borrow root energy. If you're trying to write something, for example, post-COVID, you go out to a coffee shop and potentially tap into, there's typically people coming in and out. You can tap into the energy there to help if you're sort of spinning your wheels, getting things going. So again, this kind of outlines the, gate 4 is defined. That's called a hanging gate because it's not a channel. It's just hanging there by itself. Here we have the defined channel, the 3740. I also have the defined channel, the 2946. And as I mentioned, the 4130. And then we have the defined centers, and those are the ones that are colored in. So types are very important because you're going to get your authority from them. As I mentioned, generators and manifesting generators, about 70% of the population. We're here to do things, and we're here to do things because we have that sacral motor. As generators, we're here to do things in response. So we need something to respond to. So I'm a generator. The fact that I'm here, Angela gave me something to respond to. And so because we're here to do things, a generator needs to respond, and they need to trust their gut, because it's that sacral motor that knows what you have energy for if you're a generator. And it knows what you have energy for right in the moment. So if some people have experienced this more as a feeling, that the gut is loose or comfortable. If you're facing a decision, should I buy that new car? Should I take this job? Should I go to the grocery store now? The gut will have a feeling, and if it's loose or comfortable, it's a yes. If it's uptight or tense, it's a no. Some people hear it more as an auditory sound. Like if I said, should I go to the grocery store? I might hear a uh-huh or a uh-uh. It's very primitive like. And you can use this actually if you're a generator with friends. If you're very tied up about a decision you're trying to make, you can have them ask some simple questions and just answer uh-huh or uh-uh. And you can really kind of engage that sacral motor. And as generators, if you're a generator, I'd encourage you to play with that, because ultimately that's your authority. The mind in human design world is very powerful. It can analyze, it can weigh the pros and cons, but it's not the place the decision should be made. The decision for a generator should really be made in the sacral. That if your sacral feels like it's right for you right now, then do it. If it's not a yes, anything else, kind of get those maybe. And it's really the sacral has to say yes, because if it's a maybe, that may be indicating that it's not right today, or it's not right now. It might be right in an hour or a day or next week, but not at this moment. Projectors don't have a sacral motor, a motorized connection to the throat. They might have a defined throat, but they need a motorized connection to the throat to be what's called a manifester. Projectors, about 21% of the population. Projectors are here to guide and lead. Now, guiding and leading needs to be invited. I think we've all been in a group situation where somebody just starts giving orders or giving assignments. And typically it makes you feel like, wait a minute, who invited you to be the boss? Like, where does it, we didn't vote on this. Who decided this? And so because of that, projectors have to be invited. Otherwise, the energy is set up improperly. Now, there's some built-in invitations. A parent typically has an invitation to guide and lead their child, at least to a certain age, and when the child starts to become independent. If you get a job as a manager, then there's a certain thing. Or if you get asked to, if you're leading a group, and you have a title that's recognized as the leader, then there's sort of the written invitation. But in other situations, a projector really needs to get the invitation to be as effective as they can be. And so I recommend fishing. If you're feeling like you want to do something to get that invitation, maybe it's even just a conversation. Hey, I have a thought about that. And somebody would say, Oh, Peter, what do you think about that? Now you have the invitation. And when you have the invitation, you're going to be heard more clearly, and you're going to have more power to guide and lead. I have 2 projector children, and there's times that they've given advice to my wife and I, and it's not really invited by the situation or invited by us. And we probably don't listen to that advice as well as if we ask them. It's like, hey, we're thinking about, moving. What do you guys think about that? Then we're going to hear them better because we're ready to hear them and we've empowered them by the invitation. Now, if you look at the chart, it says wait for the invitation. I think some projectors look at that and they kind of feel like they have to just sit back and sit on their hands until, somebody calls them up or somebody walks in the door. And I don't think that's the case. I think that if you have things that you want to do, you can finesse those invitations to get the energies going in the right direction, the right relationship. Manifestors are about 8% of the population. These are people that have a motor to the throat. And so manifestors are here to be the creative spark. Probably the most common example is Steve Jobs of Apple computer or Apple products. He was a manifester. And, just think about all those things that he created. Now, he didn't create the iPhone and the iPad and the, all of those, the Nano and all those things on his own. And so the manifestor strategy is to inform, because he went out there and created a company, but he had to be informing the right people, the researchers and the scientists and the manufacturing piece, or people that gathered all those things for him. But he needed to inform the right people the right amount of information, because manifesting is a spark. It's the creative spark. I often think of it like a fire. It's like the manifestors there striking the match, but they need us to bring the kindling. They need us to bring the firewood and backup firewood to keep the fire going. But if manifestors spend all their time telling people about this fire they're going to build, it never gets built. So there's a real balance for manifestors in informing enough, informing the right people, and not over-informing, because over-informing can kill that creative spark. If you have something that you want to do and you spend all your time talking about it, it never happens, or that drive dies out. And lastly, reflectors, they comprise about 1% of the population. Their energy is extremely open because all the centers, all 9 centers, are white. They don't have a defined center. They don't have a defined channel. And the reflectors change a lot because all of those open centers, they're impacted by the people in their lives with all those different aspects that the centers bring, as well as the moon. Think about the moon. In human design, you can think of the 64 gates as a wheel that surrounds the planet. Well, as the moon goes around and it makes a full circle in 29 days or 28 to 29 days, it's going through every one of those gates about every 8 hours or so. It's switching gates. Well, when it's coming through that gate, it's activating all of us, but reflectors feel it even more significantly because they're so open. And it creates, reflectors can be a manifestor for 8 hours, or they can be a projector for 8 hours, or they could be a generator for 8 hours. So they're constantly changing, but because of this, reflectors need, like big decisions, they should really take a month. If they're looking at like a new job or buying a house. Ideally, a reflector should wait up to a month to go through all those energy changes to see how they're doing. So authority, it's never about the mind. It's determined by a combination of things driven by which centers are defined or not. There's probably too much to go into here, but it's really worthwhile to really explore your authority, because the authority is all about maximizing your life experience. It's about you saying yes to the things that you should be doing and letting go of the things that you are not supposed to be doing, whether it's time, money, materials, effort, commitment. If you follow your authority, you're going to make better decisions for yourself that will optimize your life experience, whether that's relationships or job or where you live or what you do for fun. All of that, if you follow your authority, is going to be maximized. So the profiles, this is really where I like people to start. So I'm going to finish with profiles. The profile is made up of 2 lines. In my case, I'm a 4/6 profile. There's 12 different possibilities of profiles. But ultimately, I call this the seasoning, the spices. It's all of those aspects we talked about, the centers, the gates, the channels, they're amplified or they're flavored by your profile. So the first 3 lines of the profile are inwardly focused. 1 through 3 are inwardly focused. I kind of think of them as, the first line, somebody's looking down. The second line, they're starting to look up a bit. The third line, they're still looking down a little bit, but they haven't started to fully look out. And then when you hit the 4th line, you're looking out. The 5th line, you're looking up higher. And then the 6th line, you're kind of looking up a little bit up towards the sky. So there's this inward and outward energy with the profiles. And then there are these aspects. A first line is very investigative, needs information, needs foundation from information. A second line can be a bit of a hermit, but there's also a social aspect to a second line. So second lines get a lot of invitations. The third line is experimental. And I'll say this, I say this to every third line: you have never made a mistake in your life. But a lot of third lines feel like they failed or they made mistakes. But the truth is, with human design, you were designed to make mistakes. You were designed to try things out. You were designed to experiment, because it's through that experimentation that you develop wisdom. It's the third lines that actually help the rest of us see what's the best way to do things, because they've tried it out. The 4th line is social networker. Not that they're necessarily a networking person, but their opportunity comes through their network. I'm a 4th line. I've had 8 different jobs in my career. One of them I got out of the newspaper was horrible. The other 7 all came through friends, friends of my wife, friends of family. That's where your opportunities come from, whether it's a job or whether it's, a new opportunity. If you're a 4th line, look at your network. If you're looking for a change in anything in your life, keep your eyes on your network, because that's where the opportunity is going to occur. 5th line. 5th line is very sophisticated. A lot of 5th lines feel projected on. It's a projective energy. 5th lines are typically have like a magnetism. They draw people in, but the projection works both ways, and 5th lines are complex. So we get to know the 5th lines a little bit in our first encounter, and we tend to make assumptions about them. But we really need to have 5 or 10 encounters with that person to really understand them, because there's a complexity. And lastly, sixth line. Sixth line has 3 different life stages. One, birth to 28, where they act more like a third line. They're more experimental. They're more inwardly focused. 28 to approximately 51, it's called going up on the roof. And a sixth line takes a step back, like going up on the roof, and they become more outwardly looking and look at how the world is going on around them. And then lastly, after 51, you come off the roof and you step into that role model stage, because the sixth line has the wisdom of looking at life 2 different ways. So whatever their passions are in life, we recognize that they have this wisdom that they can share. And with that, I think I'll stop so we have some time for questions and hopefully answers from me.
I loved how you talked about your kids, because I got interested in human design because of this one, because I had a very hard time understanding her when she was 1 and she's 4.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the first resonance for me, because as I've said, I'm a generator. I have 4 motor generators, so I have a lot of energy, and I could not understand why I couldn't get my son out raking leaves or stacking wood. I mean, I could get him out there. He'd last maybe a half an hour, and then he's over playing with the dog, and then he's got to go back in the house. So, for both my wife and I, it was a great relief understanding he's not designed. He only has 2 centers defined. None of them are motors. Well, actually one of them's a motor, but he just doesn't have the energy to sustain. Both my wife and I are generators. And so it was great like that, to just have this realization that they're individuals and they're wired differently. In some cases, I've also met parents that, their kids are design-wise are very similar. So they don't face those questions or dilemmas, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I feel like you covered so much that pretty much everyone's gonna go and watch the replay, because I have my life book out and I got notes on notes with all the things you said. But one thing I did like before the this little workshop, I had talked to a few of people who got their reports, and just asking, like, how far are you into it? And it was so intimidating to approach that I feel like this is going to be really vital in understanding a lot of that. And even just digesting it, because how you shared your experience with your profile and your kids and stuff, I feel like a lot of this group, even how you communicated with the tribe. I have so many notes, I'm gonna have to review them all, but I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today and to explain all of this. It's been awesome to welcome you in here. But if no one has any questions, we can wrap it up, and I'll save it for a post. Anyone have questions? Are we good? I feel like you covered a lot.
And like I said, my wife and I are planning to record that whole slideshow this weekend. So sometime next week, I'll send you the sign up link, and basically just by giving your email address, contact information, you can get a free copy of that video. So whether it's review or obviously there's some parts, that's a 30 slide slide deck. So there are parts that I really didn't get to. It is, but again, I'll emphasize, it is such a deep topic, but I do feel like, first, if you can understand your profile, that's going to give you some ahas, and then your type and your authority, that's going to help you make decisions and help you, like I said, maximize your life experience. And then there's also a lot of, it's just so beneficial to understand, you talked about your daughter, but you have somebody comes up to you in a store and you feel insulted, or or they make you smile or whatever. As you get to know human design, you can start to see, oh, that was this energy, oh, that person must be this incarnation cross, or, oh, that person was really questioning their self-worth. They must must have an undefined heart will center. And so if that's different from you, it really helps you understand and either not take things personally. That's one of the hugest gifts, I think, of human design. A lot of times we take interactions personally. And I would say that 95% of the time, there's no personal intent. It's just energy. My wife has opinions and correction. And before I met human design, I would occasionally, it's like, why is she always correcting me? And there was no intent. It was just her expressing herself. And when I saw that, I also realized, I get all this free advice. I don't even have to ask for it. It just comes to me. So you can really turn the coin on interactions like that and see that it's just energy.